The Fathom. Far out, the pure as the prettiest, and as clear as the purest, but it is very deep, so deep indeed, and many need be piled one upon the other to reach from the bottom to the. It is there that they dwell. Nor must it be imagined that there is nothing but a bare white below. No, indeed, the produces the most curious and whose and are so flexible that the slightest seems to fluster them as if they were. Great and small glide through the as, fly through hereupon. In the deepest of all stands, its are tall, pointed of the clearest, while the open and shut according. And beautiful they look, for in each any one of which would be worthy to be placed in. There had been afore many, so his aged kept for him. She was a very wise, but extremely proud of her noble, which entitled her to wear 12 on her, while other well-born might only wear 6. In all other respects she was a very praiseworthy sort of, and especially as regards the care she took of her. They were 6 pretty, but the youngest was the prettiest of all. Her was as clear and delicate as her blue. They were free to play about all long in the vast of the below, where live grew upon the large were opened when the fly into our when we open the and ate out of there. In front was a large with bright red and dark blue, whose glittered like gold, and whose were like fiery, as both and kept rustling continually. There was the most delicate, but blue as the of. Each had of in the where she might dig and plant as she pleased. One sewed her so as to come up in, another preferred but the youngest planted hers in to imitate and choose, both silent and thoughtful, and while her were delighted with all the strange but they obtained, she had never claimed anything, with the exception of the red that resembled the above, but a pretty, representing a handsome, and hewn out of pure. She planted a bright red beside and when they grew up, its fresh hung over it, where they looked quite violet and kept dancing about like There was nothing she delighted in so much as to hear about She was always asking her to tell her all she knew about, and what struck her as most beautiful was that they should shed, that they were green, and they should sing so loud and so exquisitely that it must be a treat to hear them. Her young sisters would not have understood her. When you have accomplished your 15th, said you shall have leave to sit in and then you will see both and. In the following one of the would reach the of 15, but as all the rest were each a younger than the other, the youngest would have to wait 5 before it would be her turn. However, the eldest promised to tell the others what she saw, and what struck her as most beautiful on the first, for there did not tell them enough. But none of them longed for her turn to come so intensely as the youngest, who had to wait the longest, and was so reserved and thoughtful. Many added she stand at the open, and gaze through the dark. She could see that appeared indeed rather pale. If something resembling a black glided between the and herself, she knew that it was overhead, standing below and stretching forth her towards the. The eldest was now 15. On her return, she had a great deal to relate, but the most delightful of all, she said, was to lie and gaze upon the large, where were shining like of, to listen to the of, and the busy hum of the, and to see the, and hear the ringing. And she longed after all these just because she could not approach them. Oh, how attentively her youngest listened, and later when she stood at the open and gazed up through the dark, how she about the large with its and bustle, and even fancied she could hear the ringing from the below. In the following, the second obtained leave. She went just at, which appeared to her the finest of all. She said that the whole appeared like gold, and as to their beauty was beyond all description. Red and violet above her, while of wild, resembling a long white, flew still faster than they towards the setting. She too towards it, but the sank down, and the rosy vanished. After the third went. She was the boldest of them all. She saw beautiful green covered with, and peeped out from stately. She heard the singing, and the felt so warm that she was frequently obliged to cooling her burning. She met with a whole of little human. They were naked and dabbling about. She wanted to play with them, but they flew away in great. And there came a little black, who barked at her so tremendously that she was frightened. But she should never forget the beautiful, the green, or the pretty. The fourth was less daring. She remained in the midst, and maintained that it was most beautiful at that, and they looked like above. It was now the fifth turn. Her was in therefore she saw what the others had not seen the first they went. Looked quite green and huge. Each looked she said, only larger than the built. They were of the oddest and glittered like. She had placed herself upon the largest of them, and all scudded past in great, and letting the play with her long. But towards the became overcast, it thundered and lightninged, while the dark lifted up the huge on high, so that they were illuminated by the red flashes of the lightning. All were panic-struck, while she sat quietly and watched the blue lightning as it zigzagged along. The first that each of had successfully, they had been enchanted by the and beautiful of all they saw, but now grown up and at to go as often as they pleased, they had grown indifferent to such. They longed to come, and at the end of a month they had all declared that it was far more beautiful to stay at. It frequently happened that the five would entwine their all in a. They had beautiful, far finer than any, and when I was coming on, and they anticipated they before, and sang most sweetly of the delights to be found, begging not to be afraid, but could not understand what they said, and mistook there for the howling of the, and they never saw all the fine, for if they were, and there alone. When the Indo, the youngest, would stand alone, looking after them, and felt ready to cry, only have no, and therefore suffer all the more. How I wish I were 15, said she. I am sure I shall do, and the that inhabit it. At last she reached the of 15. Well, now you are grown up, said her, to the late. So let me, you like your, and she placed in her a of every of which was half a, and the old ordered 8 large to be fastened to donate her high. But they me so, said the little. Must suffer, said the old. Oh how gladly, how gladly would she have shaken off all this, and laid aside her heavy, that in her adorned her far better, but she could not herself. Farewell, she cried. They had just as she raised her, but were still and fringed with, and through the fast vanishing rosy of the beamed the in all its beauty. There was mild and cool and quite calm. A large with 3 was lying, only a single, for not a was stirring, and were sitting all about. There were musical playing and singing, and when they grew darker of were lighted, which looked like the of all steaming through the little close to the, and as often as lifted her up, she peeped in through the transparent, and saw a number of well-dressed, but the handsomest of all, with large, he could not be above 16, and it was his that was celebrated with such magnificence, danced, and when the young came up above, were let off, that the till it was as bright as, and so frightened the little. But she soon popped out her once more, when all the inn seemed to be falling down upon her. She had never seen such before. Large were throwing out, beautiful fiery were darting through the, and all these itself was thrown into such bright that every little was distinctly visible. It was late, still the little could not take her off the hansom. The variegated were now extinguished, the seas to be let off, but there was a rumbling and a grumbling. Still she sat rocking, so as to peep into, but now began to move faster, were unfurled one after another, higher, heavy flitted across the, and flashes of lightning were seen in the, a tremendous seemed coming on. The large kept pitching to and fro, in its rapid across the raging, heaved like so many gigantic, threatening to roll over. The little fancied this was a right pleasant, but differently. Kept cracking and cracking, give way beneath the repeated lashings, was broken right in twain, and dropped on one side. The little now perceived and she was herself obliged to take care not to be, that were dispersed. For one, it was so dark that she could see nothing, but when a flash of lightning illuminated and enabled her to discern distinctly all, she looked especially for the young, who she perceived. She was then quite pleased at the of his coming to her, till she reflected that cannot live, and that he would be dead by the that he reached her. But die he must not, therefore towards him. Forgetting that they might crush her too, she managed to reach the young, who was scarcely able to any longer. His began to powerless. His beautiful were closed, and he would have died had not the little come to his. She held his. Towards the abated, but not to be seen, the rose red and beaming, and seemed to infuse into the. But his remained closed, kissed his high, polished, and stroked his. She fancied he, and she kissed him again, and wished that he might live. They now came in sight, and she saw high blue on the tops of which they looked as dazzling white as though of were laying there. Below were beautiful green, and in front stood a. She did not rightly know which, but at all events it was a. And grew in the, and tall stood in front of the. The small, and though very deep, was quite calm. Where the delicate white had formed and here she laid him down. The now peeled from the large white, and of came into the little farther away and hid herself behind some high. She watched whether any came to the poor. It was not long before a young approached the where he was laying. She appeared frightened at first, but it was only for and then she fetched off and saw that came to again, and that he smiled on all those around him. But he did not send her neither did her know she had saved him. So she felt quite afflicted, and when he was led into the large, she with a heavy, and returned to her, silent and thoughtful as she had always been. She now grew still more. Her inquired what she had seen the first. She went, but she did not tell them. Many an and many the where she had left. She saw the in the grow ripe, and then she saw it gathered. She saw the melt away from the of the, but she did not see, and each she returned more sorrowful than ever. Her only was to sit in her little, and to fling her around the beauteous. But she ceased to tend her, and they grew like all over the, entwining their long, and with the of the, so that it was quite dark beneath there. At length she could resist no longer, and opened her to one of her, from whom all the others immediately learned her, though they told it to no one else, except to a of other, who divulged it to nobody except to their most intimate. One of these happened to know who was. She too had seen the on, and informed them whence he came, and where his lay. Come, little, said the other, and entwining there in a long row, out of and at the where they knew stood. This was built of bright yellow, shining with a broad of magnificent gold rose above the, and closely imitating, were placed between the that surrounding the device. One could see through the transparent of the large, right into the magnificent, fitted up with costly and splendid and ornamented with large on all the, so that it was a pleasure to look at them. Now that she knew where he lived, she spent many an and many a on the neighbouring, she much nearer than any of the others had ventured to do, that through its long over. Here she would sit and gaze at the young, who himself quite alone in the bright. Many an did she see him in his pretty adorned with and enjoying. Then she would listen from amongst the green, and if they happened to seize hold of her, white, many a two when were spreading there, she rejoiced that she had saved his when he was half dead. She soon grew to be more fervently to be able to about amongst them. They could flayed scale that towered above and they possessed there and there, stretched away far beyond. There was such a deal that she wanted to learn, but her were not able to all her. Therefore she applied to her old, who was well acquainted with which she called, very correctly, If do not get, asked, can they live forever? Do not they die, as we do here? Yes, said the ancient, they must die as well as we, and the of there is even shorter than ours. We can live to be 3 old, but when we cease to be here, we shall only be changed and are not even buried below among those we or are not immortal. We shall never enter upon anew. We are like the green, that can never flourish again when it has once been cut through. On the contrary, have a that lives eternally. Yea, even after the has been committed to and that rises up through the clear, pure, to the bright above. So do they rise to unknown and favoured, that we shall never be privileged to see. And why have we not an immortal? Asked sorrowfully. I would willingly give all the of I may have to live, to be but for one, and to have the hope of sharing in the joys of the heavenly. You must not think about that, said the old. We feel we are much happier and better. So I shall die and be driven about, and cease to hear and to see the beautiful, and to the red. Is there nothing I can do to obtain an immortal? No, said the old, unless I you so dearly that you were more to him than either or, if all this and his were centred in you. And he allowed to lay his right in yours, promising to be faithful to you here and hereafter. Then would his glide into your, and you would obtain a share in the happiness. He would give you a without forfeiting his own, but this will never happen. Your, which is a beauty amongst us, is a deformity on, because they know no better. It is necessary there to have, that they call, in order to be beautiful. The little sighed as she cast a glance at her. Let us be let us be merry, said the old. Let us jump and hop about during the 3 that we have to live, which is really quite enough in all. We shall have On these there was a display of magnificence. The of the large were of thick, though transparent. The colossal, some of a deep red, others as green as, were hung in rows on each side, and contained blue that illuminated the whole, and shone through so that was lighted all around. Countless great and small were to be seen past some of them flaunting in scarlet, while others sparkles like gold ore. Through flowed on those surface and danced to their own sweet singing. Have no such. The sang sweetest them all, and whole applauded, and for as she felt delighted, for she knew that she had the loveliest ever heard, but soon turned once more. She could not long forget either the handsome or her at not having an immortal like his. She therefore stole out of her, where all within was, and sat down sadly in her own little. Here she heard a bugle. Now, he is surely about. Lie who insistently fills all and to whose I would fain entrust the happiness of my existence. I will venture everything to win him, and to obtain an immortal. While my are dancing yonder in I will go to who has always frightened me hitherto, but now perhaps she can advise and help me. The little then left her, and repaired to the rushing, behind which they lived. She had never gone that way before. Neither nor grew there, and nothing but bare grey lead, dragging everything they clutch hold of into the below. Between these that might have crushed her in their rude grasp, was forced to pass to each and even here during a good part of the way. There was no other than a cross of worm, which they called her. At the of this lay her in the midst of a most singular its, and where half they looked like growing out of they were long slimy with the flexible, and they could move every joint from the root to the tip. They laid fast hold of whatever they could snatch, and never yielded it up again. The little was so frightened at the sight of them that her with, and she was fain to turn, but then she of the that possessed, and she took. She knotted up her long flowing, that they might not seize hold of her, and crossing her over, she darted along, between the ugly that stretched forth their flexible and behind her. She perceived how each of them retained what it had seized, with of little as strong as, who had died, looked like white in they clutched and even a little, whom they had caught and stifled, and this appeared to her perhaps the most shocking of all. She now approached a vast, and they were large. Fat were wallowing in and displaying their ugly whitish yellow. In the midst of this loathsome stood a belt of and within sat the feeding from her. Just as people amongst us give a lump of to eat, she called the nasty fat her little, and let them creep all over her. I know what you want, said it is very stupid of you, but you shall have your way. as it will plunge you into misfortune, my fair. You want to be rid and to have a couple of, in order that the young may fall in with you, and that you obtain his and an immortal into the. And then the old laughs so loud and so repulsively that the and the fell to the where they lay wriggling about. You come just at the nick of, added the, forby I should no longer be able to help you till another had flown past. I will prepare you and you must before, and then sit down and drink it. Your will then disappear and shrivel up, but mind, it will you as much as if a sharp were thrust through you. Everybody that sees you will say you are the most beautiful mortal ever seen. You will retain the floating elegance. No dancer will move so lightly as you, but you will be like treading upon such sharp that you would think you must flow. If you choose to put up with this sufferings like these, I have the power to help you. I do, said the little, in a trembling, as she of the and of an immortal. But bethink you well, said the, if once you obtain form, you can never be again. You will never be able to your, or return to your, and if you should fail in winning the of his forgetting both and for your sake and loving you with his whole and bidding the join you're in, then you will never obtain an immortal, and the very after he will have married another, your will break, and you will dissolve. I'm resolved, said the little, who had turned as pale as death. But you must pay me, said the, and it is no small matter I require. You have the loveliest of all and you reckon upon its tones to charm him into loving you. Now you must give me this beautiful. I choose to have the best of all you possess in exchange for my valuable, for I must mix my own with it, that it may prove as sharp as two-edged. But if you take away said the little, what have I left? Your lovely form, said the, you're expressive, with these you surely can be full of. Well, has your melted away? Come put out your little, and let me cut it off for my fee, and you shall have your valuable. So be it, said the little, and they put her on the to prepare the. Cleanliness is quoth she, scouring the with the that she had tied into after which she pricked her own and let her black trickle down into they rose up in such fanciful that no one could have looked at them without a shudder. They kept flinging fresh into and when it began to simmer it was like the wailings of At length the was ready, and it looked like the purest spring. Here it is, said the, cutting off the little. So now she was dumb, and could neither sing nor speak. If this should seize hold of you on your return through said the, you need only sprinkle a single of this over them, and will be shivered to 1,000 pieces. But the little had no need of this. They drew in from her on perceiving the dazzling that shined in her like a twinkling. So she crossed rapidly through the the and the raging. She saw her. They were now extinguished in the large, and she knew the whole were asleep within. But she did not dare venture to go and seek them, now that she was dumb and was about to leave them forever. Her seemed ready to burst with anguish. She stole into the and plucked a from each of her, kissed her 1,000 to the. They had not yet risen when she saw the and reached the magnificent. They shone brightly. The little drank the sharp and burning, and it seemed as if a two-edge was run through her delicate. She fainted away and remained apparently less. When the rose, she awoke and felt a sharp pang, but just before her stood the handsome young. He gazed at her so intently with his black that she cast hers to the, and now perceived that her had disappeared, and that she had that I could desire. Only having no on, she was obliged to enwrap herself in her long thick. They inquired who she was and how she had come thither, but she could only look at him with her mild but sorrowful deep blue, for speak she could not. He then took her by the and led her into the. She took was, as they had warned her would be, the treading on the points of and sharp, but she bore it willingly, and in with the she glided in lightly, so that he, as well as everybody else, marvelled at her lovely aerial. She was now dressed in costly and was the most beautiful of all but she was dumb and could neither sing nor speak. Handsome in and gold came and sang before the and his, and one of them happening to sing more beautifully than all the others, they clapped his and smiled. This afflicted the little. She knew that she herself had much more exquisitely, and oh, did he but know that to be near him, I sacrifice my to all eternity. They now performed a variety of elegant aerial-looking dances to the sounds of the most delightful. The little then raised her beautiful white, stood on the tips of her, and floated across the in such a way as no one had ever danced before. Every revealed some fresh beauty, and her appealed still more directly to the singing of the had done. Everybody was enchanted, but most of all the who called her his little, and she danced on and on, though every she felt as if she was treading on sharp. They declared that he would never part with her, and she obtained leave to sleep on a velvet before his. He had her dressed in that that she might accompany him on. They then rode together through the perfumed, where the green touched their shoulders, and the little sang amongst the cool. She climbed her up by the side, and though her tender bled so that the others perceived it, she only laughed at her sufferings, and followed him till they could see the rolling beneath them, like of bound from some distance. When others slept throughout she would go and sit on for it cooled her burning, to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the, for it cooled her burning to bathe them, and then she of those. She would go and sit on the won her in and sang so mournfully as they glided over. She then made them when they recognised her, and told her how deeply she had afflicted them all. After that they visited her every, and one she perceives at a great distance her aged, who had not come for many, and the with his on his. They stretched out there to her, but they did not venture so near as her. Each she grew to the more fondly, and he her just as one a dear good. But as to choosing her for his, such an idea never entered his. Yet, unless she became his, she would not obtain an immortal, and would melt on the of his another. Don't you me best of all? Would the little seem to ask, when he embraced her and kissed her fair. Yes, you best, said the, for you have the best of any. You are the most devoted to me, and you resemble a young whom I once saw, but whom I shall never meet again. I was me near a holy, where several young were performing divine. The youngest of them found me on the and saved my. I saw her only twice. She would be the only one that I could in this, but are like hers, and you have almost driven her out of my. She belongs to the holy, and therefore my good has sent you to me, and we will never part. Alas, he knows not that was I who saved his, the little. I bore him across to the where stands the holy, and sat beneath the to watch whether any came to help him. I saw the pretty whom he better than he does me, and fetched a deep, for she had none to shed. He says the belongs to the holy, and she will therefore never return to the. They not meet again. While I am by his side and see him every, I will take care of him, and sacrifice my to him. But now came a of the about to, and to obtain for his the beautiful of a neighbouring, and that was why he was fitting out such a magnificent. There was ostensibly on a mere visit to his neighbours, but to see he was to be accompanied by a numerous. The little shook he and smiled. She knew the better than the others did. I must, he said to her, I must see this beautiful, because my require it for me. But they will not force me to bring her home as my. I cannot her. She will not resemble the beautiful in the whom you are like. And if I were compelled to choose it should sooner be you, my dumb, with those expressive of yours. And he kissed her rosy, and played with her long, and rested his against her, which high with hopes of an immortal. You're not afraid of, my dumb, are you? Said he, as they stood on that was to the neighbouring, and he talked to her about the calm of the singular to be found, and of the wonderful saw, and she smiled, for she knew better than anyone else what was in. During when all were asleep, not even expecting, she sat and gazed through, and fancied she saw her. It stood her aged, with her on her, looking intently. Then her gazed at her mournfully, and wrung with their white. she made to them, smiled, and would fain have told them that she was happy and well off, but the approach and the leaving him to believe that the white he described were only. Next came into the neighbouring splendid. They were all set a-ringing, sounded flourishes from high, and with flying and shining stood ready to welcome the strange. Every brought some fresh, and succeeded each other, but there was not yet there, for she had been brought up, people said, in a far distant holy, where she had acquired all manner of royal. At last she came. The little was curious to judge of her beauty, and she obliged to acknowledge to herself that she had never seen a lovelier face. Her was delicate and transparent, and beneath her long dark sparkled a pair of sincere dark blue. "It is you," cried you who saved me when I lay like a lifeless. And he folded his blushing in his. "Oh, I am too happy," said he to the little. "My fondest has to come to pass. You will rejoice at my happiness, for you wish me better than any of them." And the little kissed his hand and felt already as if her was about to break. His would bring her death, and she would be then changed. All were ringing, and the roads through and proclaimed the approaching. Perfumed was burning and costly on all the were swinging there, while and joined there, and received the believing. The little dressed in and gold held up but her did not hear the solemn, neither did her behold she of the approaching gloom of death, and of all she had lost. That same the and went, the roaring, the were steaming, and a costly of old and purple, lined with beautiful, had been prepared for all the bridal pair. With a favourable, and glided smoothly. When it grew dark, a number of variegated were lighted, and danced merrily. The little could not help remembering her first visit, when she witnessed similar festivities and magnificence, and she twirled round in the dance, half poised in like a swallow when pursued, and all present cheered her in ecstasies, for never had she danced so enchantingly before. Her tender felt the sharp pangs of, but she heeded it not, for a sharper pang had shot through her. She knew this was the last she should ever be able to see him, for whom she had left both her and her, sacrificed her beautiful, and daily suffered most excruciating pains, without his having never that such was the case. It was the last on which she might breathe the same as he, and gaze on an eternal, unenlivened by either or, nor awaited her, for she had no, and could never now obtain one. Yet all his joy and gait lay till long past, and she was fain to laugh and dance, though the of death were in her. The kiss is beautiful, and she played with his black, and then they went in to rest beneath the splendid. All was now quiet, only was sitting at as the little leaned her white on the edge and looked towards the east for the first blush of. The first beam she knew must kill her. She then saw they were as pale as herself, and their long and beautiful were no longer streaming for they had been cut off. We gave them said they, to obtain help that you might not die tonight. She gave us an exchange, and a sharp one it is, as you may see. Now before you must plunge it into and when his worm shall besprickle, they will again close up, and you will be once more, and can come to us and live out your 3 before you turn to inanimate. Haste then, he or you must die before. Our old has fretted, her white has fallen, as ours has fallen under the. Haste then, do you not perceive those red in a few minutes they will rise, and then you must die. And they then fetched a deep sigh. The little lifted the scarlet of and beheld the fair resting her on and she bent down and kissed his beautiful, then looked up at where the rosy dawn grew brighter and brighter, then gazed on the sharp, and again turned her towards who was calling his by her name, and calling his by her name in his sleep. She alone filled his, and clutched instinctively, but in another she hurled the far away that gleamed readily where it fell, as though of. She gave the one last dying look, and jumped overboard, and felt her body dissolving. The now rose its through kindly warmth, and the little did not experience the pangs of death. She saw the bright, and above were floating of transparent beautiful. She could still catch a glimpse of the white, and of the red across the saw of these lovely. There was but 2 ethereal to be heard, just as no can discern there, though without their lightness poises them in the little saw that she had alike theirs, that kept rising higher and higher. Where am I? Asked she, and her sounded like that of her, so ethereal that no could give an adequate idea of its sweetness. Amongst they, has not an immortal, and cannot obtain one unless she wins her eternal welfare depends on the will of another. But although not possessing an immortal can obtain one by their good. We fly to warm countries and to fan the burning, laden with that destroys the of. We diffuse the of through to heal and to refresh. When he striven for 3 to do all the good in our. We then obtain an immortal and share in the eternal happiness. You, poor little, have striven with your whole like ourselves. You have suffered and endured, and have raised yourself into an aerial, and now your own good works may obtain you an immortal after the lapse of 3. And the little lifted her brightening and for the first she felt them filled with. All was now astir, and she could see and his beautiful looking for her, and they knew. She then kissed and fanned unseen by either of them, and then mounted, together with the other of the, and the rosy cloud that was sailing through the atmosphere. Thus shall we glide into the of, after the lapse of 3, said she. We reach it sooner, whispered one of the. We enter unseen the dwellings of, and for each on which we have met with a good, who is the joy of his, and deserving of their, the shortenings, the of our trial, the little thinks, when we fly through the, and smiled for joy at such a discovery. Data is deducted from the 3 we have to live. But when we see an ill-behaved or naughty, we shed a sorrow, and every adds a to the of our.